Greetings, fellow humans. I can't stop thinking about this show called The Dragon Prince. Me and my partner raced through all 3 seasons in a cozy lockdown, and I found myself not ready to leave the world of Xadia.
I don't want to go.
But why? What makes it so good? Why do I, a 28-year-old human, love this show, which is ostensibly a kid's cartoon? I'm not a child. Well, I'm making this video to find out. And because this is YouTube, I've written it as a list. Full spoilers ahead for seasons 1 to 3, so if you haven't watched it and might want to,
Go away.
The Dragon Prince is an animated fantasy show of great ambition, created by Aaron Eharts, widely recognised for his work as head writer on Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Justin Richmond, known for his game direction on the Uncharted series. 3 seasons have been released on Netflix so far, with a full saga of 4 more seasons on the way. Let's get into why it's good. First up, I dig the story. And I don't mean the grand overarching story of the whole continent, we'll get to that. I'm talking about the quest that drives seasons, or books, 1 to 3, where our small band of 5 heroes must traverse the world to deliver the eponymous dragon prince to his mother, first as an egg and then as a cute baby dragon. They hope that this gesture will avert total war between humans and the magical bastards, fellow inhabitants of the universe, the dragons and elves. But before we get there, equilibrium. No, not the 2002 Christian Bale film, Todorov's Equilibrium. You may remember this concept from media studies class, but you were probably asleep or studying a STEM field. Basically, the audience wants to know what life was like for the characters before the proverbial hits the fan. This humanizes them, or elfinizes them, and shows the audience what they have to lose and what they have to gain. Dan Harmon calls this the zone of comfort in his story circle. For stories set in the real world, this is simple enough. For fantasy worlds, there's often a lot to get through. Enter the classic prologue. In The Dragon Prince, we are taken on a whistle-stop tour through the history of Xadia, narrated by the sultry voice of Eric Dellums, where we learn about the 6 primal sources of magic. Naturally, a human goofed and upset this balance by discovering dark magic, so the elves and dragons banished all humans to the east, where they were exiled under the watchful eye of the King of the Dragons. Miffed at this turn of events, the humans embraced dark magic and killed the Dragon King, and now the continent is on the brink of all-out war. And that's it, all we need to know about the world wrapped up into 3 minutes. But for our protagonist Callum, equilibrium just means getting whooped on the training field, crushing on Claudia, and generally feeling out of place as the step prince. For Ezran, it means stealing jelly tarts, and for Rayla, it means training to become a ruthless assassin who can slaughter humans without mercy. Then comes the inciting incident, the assassination of King Harrow and the assassination attempt where Rayla tries to kill Callum as he pretends to be Ezran. It is quite the meet-cute. Luckily, they stumble across the dragon egg, and here lies the call to adventure. If Rayla returns the dragon egg with a couple of dirty humans, she can redeem herself and avert the war. Ezran has to go on the run anyway to avoid the other assassins, and Callum can hardly let him go on his own and trust an elf. And he would quite like to stop the war as well. Within the first 3 episodes, we have big stakes, our gang of heroes, each with their own motivations, and a large world to explore. Sign me up! It's hard to overestimate how much heavy lifting these first 3 episodes have to do. We all want to get on the road with Team Zim as fast as possible. This is the strength of episodic shows after all, where the characters become our companions. Fans of Avatar, The Last Airbender know this well. Simply hanging out with Team Aang is one of the best parts of the show. It's the reason why I still think about Digimon Adventure 01 from my childhood, and why so many of us have fond memories of the Fellowship of the Ring. But we won't care about the characters if we don't understand their motivations, so it can be hard for shows to strike this balance between story exposition and character development. The Dragon Prince nails this in the opening trilogy of episodes. We have our quest, and we have our team. The world is intriguing, and the conflicts are interesting. Let's spend some time with the gang. Reason 2, the characters. We have our protagonist, Callum, a boy who has no obvious talents except for being a great artist and a kind big brother. He is struggling to find out who he is and who he wants to be. I definitely can't relate to that. Then there is the badass elf assassin, Rayla, who has the terrible habit of not killing humans. Rounding off the trio is Callum's adorable little brother Ezran, who is a pastry-pilfering prince with a huge heart. He can also talk to animals. Just go with it. His relationship to Callum is crafted well. Take this example in episode 4, where Ezran instinctively knows to offer his back so that Callum can draw the Winter Lodge. It's a cute touch and makes their relationship feel alive outside the confines of the story. And let's not forget Bait, the adorable animal sidekick that, thanks to Disney, is now compulsory for all family entertainment. But when they're as cute as this grumpy little glow toad, I'm not going to complain. We get to see these characters grow as they acquire new skills, take on more responsibilities, and come to terms with their messy heritage. For example, let's compare these 2 extreme close-ups of Rayla in the first and last episode of Book 1. Rayla begins the show as an agent of death who can't go through with killing, and ends Season 1 as a protector of life. These similar shots showed the contrast between where she came from and where she is now. There's even a little love in the air. Callum and Rayla literally fall for each other, ending up in love. Or at least whatever love looks like for 14-year-old children. Sorry, Claudium shippers, that ship has sailed. The romance does feel organic though, and that may be because, according to Justin Richmond, it was. I admit, I was rooting for them. My favourite episode in Book 1 is Episode 8, where our characters wind up stuck in pairs and unable to move. Rayla with Ezran and Callum with Ellis. It's a quiet episode that dives into our two main characters' psyches and clearly spells out their inner conflicts. It's storytelling 101 and isn't exactly subtle, but it feels earned and relatable. Having the two youngest characters be the bearers of innocent wisdom is a classic touch. It's satisfying to watch these characters transition from mutual fear and distrust to becoming a kind of chosen family on the road. Not you though, Ellis, they've already forgotten about you. For example, Book 2 kicks off with Callum writing about how awesome Rayla is, and Book 3 echoes this with Rayla pleading for Sol Regum to spare Callum because he is actually a decent human. Add to this the scene where Callum calls Rayla a hero, and we are all aboard this ship. My favourite example of the show's maturity in its relationships is at the start of Book 2. Rayla has been unable to find the right moment to tell Callum that her adoptive father Runan has assassinated the king, Callum's stepdad Harrow. Don't you just hate it when that happens? Anyway, Claudia enters the picture and tells Callum the truth, sacrificing the vibe of their date in the process. The episode ends with Callum in tears, finally realising what has happened and that Rayla has kept it from him. It's an impactful moment and a great end to the episode. But here's where the show surprised me. A weaker series would have strung this confrontation out for a whole season, with a new rift forming between the characters that must be overcome for them to complete the mission. Most of us, at least those as old as me, have seen this kind of story many times before. But in the very next episode, Callum tries to tell Ezran the truth about their dad, and realises that he can't do it either, because he wants to protect Ezran from pain. He ends up forgiving Rayla, who is there to console him. It's a great moment for the characters and strengthens their friendship. It's all dealt with in 2 episodes, and feels neither rushed nor prolonged. And crucially, these characters are fun to spend time with, whether it's Rayla's human impressions, Callum's jerk-face dance, or Ezran's never-ending quest for jelly tarts. So many TV shows take themselves too seriously, and seem to delight in misery, with scene after po-faced scene. In The Dragon Prince, we get death, revenge, and all that good stuff with a side helping of Adorables, fart flowers, and
mage wings.
I am also here for the long scenes when all the characters tell painfully bad jokes. These 3 lovable dummies are the heart of the show, so much so that in books 1 and 2, I found myself impatient to get through the exposition-heavy B-plots with Viren and get back to the main quest. But there are great supporting characters too. You have Callum's goofy childhood crush who's on a collision course with dark magic, medieval Steve Harrington, this majestic creep who needs an ASMR channel right now, don't pretend you wouldn't listen.
How may I serve you?
And General Amaya, who can beat the crap out of anyone, elf or otherwise. Her duels and eventual friendship with Janae provide some of the coolest moments in Book 2. As the show progressed, we also got to know more elves, with fun characters like Lujane and her terrible advice satirising the hermit guru trope. There's also the ever-mischievous Nyx and Rayla's other adoptive father, Ithari. Just dunk your head in the gosh darn lake, dude, Runan is alive! I particularly liked the background story of Marcos, which is threaded throughout the show. First as the Crown Guard soldier who Rayla spares, then as a deserter of Viren's army, and finally as a soldier with the deserters and the forces of Durin.
You fought bravely.
Thank you.
Another great piece of character writing is Harrow's letter to Callum, which we finally get to hear in Book 2. Good stuff. The voice acting is solid across the board, and it's great to hear Jack DeSena of soccer fame back on another cartoon with a growing fandom.
Boomerang?
And there are so many characters to get to know better in Book 4, like Queen Anya and the Dragon Queen Zubeia. But until then, I'll have to content myself with rewatching the show and appreciating my third reason for loving it, the art direction. One of the main criticisms of the show, especially during Season 1, was the low frame rate in some of the animations. And yeah, they do look janky at times, but it appears that this was a result of creative decisions and the ever-present TV time pressure. Giancarlo Volpe, exec producer on the series, explained in a Reddit AMA, animating in CG allows us to have more dynamic camera angles and lighting, but one of the dangers of animating in CG is that the characters can look floaty. To correct this, we looked at lots of anime, including Miyazaki, and noticed they draw 8 to 12 frames per second, instead of 24 frames per second. We asked our animators to emulate this approach. You'll see this floatiness in lots of CGI animation, especially in kids' TV shows and video games, where time and budget are perhaps tighter. It turns out creating realistic animation in a computer is pretty hard. So the showrunners on The Dragon Prince took the creative decision to blend 2D and 3D animation styles to get the best of both worlds. But here is where the difficulty lies. The team crafted a 2D hand-drawn aesthetic by using beautiful matte-painted environments and vibrant character designs with toon lines, and then composited their shots with the greater freedom of computer-generated animation and lighting. This is where the frame rate disparity comes in. We are conditioned by nearly 100 years of cinematic history, whether we're conscious of it or not. 24 frames per second has been the standard in Hollywood since the late 1920s, accompanying 35mm sound film. 24 frames per second feels right to us now. Any faster and shots feel hyper-real. Any slower and they feel jerky. Directors and producers mess with this formula at their peril. Remember how strange and fluid everything felt when watching The Hobbit at 48 frames per second? It took 3 whole movies to adjust the cinematography and lighting to compensate. And they had Lord of the Rings money. The lesson? Viewers are sensitive to frame rate changes. I am getting to the point, I promise. In traditional 2D animation, one drawing is shown for every 2 frames of film. So the frame rate of the image is effectively 12 frames per second. This is known as shooting on 2s. Many cartoons and animes were shot on 3s or even 4s, meaning one drawing for every 3 or 4 frames. This saved time and money for the studios and became part of the look and feel that audiences came to expect. CGI animation never had this consideration. In CGI, you build your environment, rig your characters, and keyframe your animations and camera moves in the computer software, and you can have as many frames as you want, given a large enough render farm. This is why Pixar's Toy Story looks so smooth in comparison to Studio Ghibli's Whisper of the Heart, both released in 1995. In The Dragon Prince, they're trying to blend character animations shot on 2s or 3s with CGI environments and camera movements that have the fluidity of 24 frames per second. This hybrid takes some getting used to for the viewer and is a hard balance to pull off. Some Redditors even felt sick watching the show. Personally, I grew to like the style, and before long I was so immersed in the story that I stopped noticing any stunted movements. I'll take a few choppy dialogue scenes if the trade-off is beautiful locations, cool character designs, and epic fight scenes. And let's face it, creating around 225 minutes of animation per season on a TV budget and deadline is no joke. They probably had to take a couple of shortcuts. And if you were one of those people turned off by this style in Season 1, the good news is that the creators took the feedback on board and smoothed out the rough edges for Season 2 and beyond. The final battle in Book 3 is a visual feast. There are so many beautiful wide shots in The Dragon Prince. Seriously, I could and have pulled dozens of potential screensavers from this show. Because the narrative is a travelling quest, the artists and designers have to come up with new locations almost every episode. In Book 1, we have glimpses of Xadia, the border, Katolis, and the surrounding forests. We soon move to the Winter Lodge, up the snowy peak where Bait burps a snow Nami, and finally, up the cursed caldera. I have heard some complaints about some of the world feeling less populated than it should, and I think this comes down to another necessary trade-off for a show of this scope. Book 2 takes us from the breach to the Moon Nexus, through the skies, across an ocean, to the summit of the 5 Kingdoms where Viren delivers some outrageous pitch theatre, the plains of Xadia, Callum's dream world where he casually becomes a sail, and finally to the Moonstone Path. In Book 3, Rayla, Callum and Zim finally make it to Xadia and visit Rayla's hometown Silver Grove. These scenes are enchanting, what with Callum's excitement to finally visit magical lands and Rayla's eagerness to share the wonders. It was great to see Xadia live up to the hype after 2 seasons of build-up. For whatever reason, I am a sucker for bioluminescence in media. I went to see James Cameron's Avatar in the cinema 3 times, and not for the plot. I am also a big fan of blue, pink and purple colour palettes. Put this colour scheme in your movie, shows or games, and I will most likely be there for it. The animators also have the freedom to play with different styles, embracing the format in fun ways that help give the show its light-hearted tone. And a big shout out must go to the credits sketches. They do a fantastic job of fleshing out character backstories, foreshadowing important items, and even doing the legwork of C and D storylines, as in the case of Corvus tracking Team Zim. Here's one from the very first episode, depicting Athari making his moon opals. We won't meet Athari until Book 3, Episode 3. I love it when a franchise has a well thought out plan. Any chat about the visuals wouldn't be complete without mentioning the lighting. If there was ever a show which revelled in dawn and dusk, it is this one.
It's like the sky is painted with honey.
They nailed the light blooms, and the way light wraps around the characters really sells the toon characters in the 3D world. The creative choice to have lens flares also makes the world feel more realistic. A cursory glance at the credits shows the intense amount of effort and hours that must have gone into this look, and I think the results speak for themselves. All of this would be for little if it wasn't for the world building of the show, which hooks us in the opening prologue and keeps us guessing for all 3 seasons. Callum acts as the perfect audience surrogate as he learns more about the magic system, with first Claudia and then Rayla acting as teachers. Relics from Xadia are introduced early on, such as the Sunfire Blade and the Dragon Queen's Mirror, providing hints of what is to come. Dark magic is simple to understand and yet nuanced. We feel for Harrow and his quest for revenge, and Viren, like all good villains, certainly has a point. He did save 100,000 lives after all. Sorry, Sarai, some shortcuts are worth pursuing. For
Humanity itself.
Fun fact, dark magic spells are just English lines played backwards.
Ash of fallen, rise again, smoky seekers.
I guess it is a little more unnerving than smoky seekers. Let's face it, Sol Regum is a bit of a bastard. I find myself siding with the humans a lot of the time. I mean, it is sad that a deer has to die so that Soren can walk, but maybe it's worth it? And I hear venison is delicious. There is a lot of grey area with dark magic, and I think it is a strength of the show that should be explored more in the saga. The writers are careful not to overload the audience with lore too quickly, slowly introducing us to the other human kingdoms and elf civilizations. I do wish we had more time to explore Luxoria though. Along the way there are plenty of references to other fantasy stories, and even some memes sprinkled in.
Anyway, here's the Wonder Wall.
Sure, it's a kids' cartoon, but it's good to see a few nods for us adults.
Winter is coming, eventually.
And now that the gang has finally made it to Zadia, there is much more to explore, especially about the other elven races we're yet to meet. The writers and designers have embraced their fantasy setting and made diversity an embedded part of the world that never feels tokenistic. Even freckly gingers are represented in Catolis, albeit locked in a basement for 2 whole seasons. No PTSD here for Gren.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't.
There is a great moment in episode 5 where General Amaya gives a long monologue in American Sign Language to her sister's grave. This scene lasts for over 50 seconds before Viren shows up, an eternity in a kids show, and there are no subtitles. The majority of the audience, who presumably don't understand sign language, are left to take cues from the context, emotions, and signing itself. And we don't even know who Sarai is yet. That is a big risk to take in such an early episode. One of the show's central themes is about the prejudice between the human and magical races. It provides a tense undercurrent to the world, but plays out quickly with our main characters, who overcome their prejudice early on in Book 1. The theme never becomes preachy or overbearing on the plot, but it is sadly believable throughout. This mutual human and elf/dragon distrust offers more room for story going forward. There's a great flashback scene where King Harrow muses on wearing Lady Justice's blindfold, imagining how he would feel if he had to be born anew into a random family. I have nothing interesting to comment on this scene, except to say that it good. LGBT representation is strong too, with multiple gay characters given plenty of screen time, and Kazi, the first non-binary character I've seen in a kids cartoon. Not that I watch that many kids cartoons. The orientations of these characters have little effect on the plot. One of the benefits of writing a fantasy is that you can shape the culture there without minimizing the struggles of the real world. The writers of The Dragon Prince have crafted a land without homophobia and transphobia, and it is nice to spend time there. Tying everything together is the music, scored by Frederick Wiedmann, who weaves together cellos and violins and a whole host of international instruments. The soundtrack is bopping, and look at his website picture, he knows it. My favourite track is Hold On Tight from Book 3, which scores the moment when Rayla takes Callum into a forest in Zadia. It's a great example of fantasy world building without dialogue and strengthens the 2 lead characters' relationship. In fact, that episode, Book 3 Episode 2, might be my favourite of the whole series. It is, for want of a less cheesy word, magical. I had a goofy grin on my face the whole time while watching it, and it seems I'm not the only one. With all of this good stuff being said, I do have a few nitpicks with the show. At the end of Book 2, Soren gets whomped by the dragon Pyrrha. You hear the crunch of his back, and soon realise that he's paralysed. It's a fantastic moment where the stakes suddenly feel very real, and there's an opportunity for character growth here, given Soren's jock style and his reliance on physicality. But the show squanders this potential by having Claudia heal him in the next episode. With hindsight, we know that this storyline was never meant for Soren, but to illustrate Claudia's further descent into dark magic. Still, this resolution felt rushed to me, and I was enjoying Soren the poet. At least he gets a good arc in Book 3, so all is forgiven. I also have to bring up the Baker, and how weird it was when he shows up for the battle in the Book 3 finale, with his rolling pin and apron. The dude is taking on armoured magical beasts with weaponized jelly tarts, and winning. It was funny, but definitely took me out of the moment in what was otherwise an amazing episode. And lastly, I know I'm not the only one to say this, but it took me a long time to truly accept that Harrow was dead. Viren's ability to perform a soul switch led me and many other fans to theorise that Harrow was still alive inside his bird Pip. For the record, I do believe Harrow getting killed was the right move for the story, but not believing it for all of Book 1 definitely took away the emotional impact of some of the scenes. I also got the impression that Callum knew his father was dead when they left the castle all the way back in episode 3, and was only keeping a brave face for Ezran. So I was surprised later on when he started writing that letter to his dad. But these are all minor quibbles. So what do I hope for Book 4? I'm excited to see where Claudia goes next. How will Aaravos treat her? Will she replace Viren as his vessel? Will she even get a redemption, or will she go full Daenerys? Rayla's story progression is clear. She has to find out what happened to Runan and her parents. But where does that leave our boy Callum? As advisor to King Ezran? It's not obvious where to take his story next, especially since he now has his mage wings. How can he continue to be one of the main characters now that their quest is finished and the grown-ups are in charge? It's a tough writing challenge. I'm looking forward to more elven politics and getting to meet some Tidebound, Startouch, and Earthblood elves. I'm also here for more Elf Callum.
All me best mates are trees.
There's a lot of hype for Aaravos' backstory now, and I hope they can live up to it. As for Viren, I would like to see a redemption arc for him too. He's the ultimate pragmatist, and has definitely screwed up too much to live, but I still believe he was doing what he thought best for humanity. I'd wager a Season 4 death for him, which Aaravos exploits to turn Claudia even more to the dark side. By the way, I have deliberately avoided spoilers for Through the Moon, the canonical graphic novel which takes place between books 3 and 4. You can probably guess, but yes, I loved it, and would recommend you read it. To wrap up this sycophantic love letter, if you haven't watched the show and for some reason watched this video, please stop being a dum-dum and go watch it. Otherwise, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Where can they take the story now that Zim has returned safely? Will there be a time jump? How long will we have to wait for Season 4? Happily, the folks at Wonderstorm are working on all sorts of projects set in the Dragon Prince universe, with a full saga picked up by Netflix, a tabletop RPG, and even a video game in the works. I found this show at the perfect time. It was January 2021 and I was locked down with my partner. We were grateful to be healthy and secure, but wanted a little escapism. We gave this kids cartoon a shot and stuck with it. I'm so glad we did. Thanks for watching. This is my first video essay after several attempts, and I am nervous to share it with the internet. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel for more in the future. Cheers!